We good? All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and to the three individuals who are actually sitting in the room with me. I may be looking at them more frequently than I do the webcam, just it's a little bit more comfortable. My name is Jeremy Striegel. I am a staff attorney with the Atlanta Legal Aid Society, which is a nonprofit that operates here in Atlanta, providing assistance by and large to low-income individuals and their families in civil matters. I am here today because I am a VA accredited attorney, which means I am legally allowed to give advice regarding VA cash benefits, and then some other things that we'll be going over today. So the focus here is going to be a very broad and general issue spotting for VA benefits. If you are interacting with a veteran, then these are some of the things that you should be thinking about in reviewing their cases or when they're talking with you. Everything that is contained herein is mostly my opinion. There are some facts that are just facts, and I will note them as such, but by and large, please consult an attorney, specifically a VA accredited attorney, if you have specific questions regarding VA cash benefits. So, the VA is divided into two separate arms. There's the Veterans Benefits Administration, and that is going to handle things like education and training, home loans, burials, life insurance, and then the focus of this conversation, which is income benefits. And then there's, of course, the VA, the Health Administration side, which is handling VA hospitals, prescriptions, all the benefits that come from the medical services. So the most important thing that we're going to be discussing today, pretty much because it's really the thing that's going to assist veterans the most, is the monetary cash benefits. And so when we say cash benefits, we're referring to two specific types of cash benefits. So two specific types of benefits veterans could be entitled to on a monthly basis. The first is disability compensation, and we'll get into these in more detail in a second, but this, just quick, is service-connected disabilities that the veteran has, and there are no income or asset limits here. And we'll explain that in a moment. The second is a VA pension, which is not related to service-connected disabilities, but does have income guidelines and resource guidelines. So let's dig into disability compensation. And since I'm going to be talking a lot, I'm going to have a drink of water first. Disability compensation. Who is eligible? So this is going to be a veteran who has some sort of service-connected disability, some sort of service-connected illness, something that occurred during their time in service that has resulted in a disability or an injury that is long-lasting. And so what's important here is that the service-connected disability is something that was aggravated by a person's time in service or occurred during their time in service. And really we're going to focus, or most veterans focus on that last part, which is a disability that occurred while in service. So an example could be shot in the line of duty, could be someone who was injured loading cargo, something that also, happened that was part of their job description or that, they were doing in service of their job. Interestingly enough, there are cases though where veterans have been able to receive benefits based on back injuries sustained while playing sports for a military league. That was considered something that was injured or an injury during time in service, and the VA, on a case-by-case basis reviews that, and they thought, yep, that is service-connected. An important distinction here, and of course these slides are not exhaustive, so some things I say here, make a note on the side of your paper, but an important distinction here is that whatever the injury is, or whatever the disability is, it cannot have been your fault. So for example, if you get into a fight, or if a veteran gets into a fight, even if it's on base, even if they just came off duty, that's going to be something that was probably their fault, circumstances depending, and the VA is not going to look at that favorably. So it has to be something that you did not willfully engage in or not through your own negligence sustain. So the disability is the important factor here. And there are a list of presumed disabilities that the VA has that basically say, if you were serving during this time or in this location, or if you are experiencing XYZ factors, you can look on this list of presumed disabilities and the VA will automatically say, yep, that is service connected. We're not going to have to go through further steps of going through medical records, doctor's findings, doctor's visits, etc. We're going to automatically grant you that service connection. Otherwise, a veteran is going to need essentially what I call a chain. And it's going to be a chain from the disability itself to now. And in that chain, each link is going to need to be a piece of evidence. It could be buddy statements saying, here is a coworker of mine who witnessed the injury, but more importantly, it's going to be doctor's records. And it's going to be doctor's reports from when you were in service, doctor's reports from when you were out of service, but a link in the chain that shows I was disabled during my time in service and I am still disabled now. I am entitled to these benefits. So the evidence is very important here, and it's best to get a jump on that when you're still in service, or if you have just left service, trying to get the link or to get those medical records as quickly as possible. So the other important issue here, aside from it being a service connected, is that you have to have been discharged under what's called other than dishonorable conditions. So in the military, there are different discharge statuses or discharge types. They go from honorable to general under honorable, other than honorable, bad conduct, and then dishonorable discharge. So basically, veterans are only entitled to benefits if they are honorable or general other than honorable, or excuse me, general under honorable. Essentially, the VA does not want to reward bad conduct, which would probably have given the veteran a lower discharge type. So providing that you were discharged under honorable conditions, you have a service-connected disability with evidence, you can apply, and we'll get into the application part later, but once you apply, the VA is going to look at the different disabilities that the veteran has listed and then assign a percentage to each disability. And as long as the percentages equal 10% or higher, monthly benefits will start getting paid out. And there is a pay table that gets updated every year that the VA releases, showing if you are 10% disabled, this is what you would get. If you are 60% disabled, this is what you get. So every year, a veteran can always look and see what they might be entitled to. The other part, speaking of discharge types, veterans are able to request an upgrade to their discharge type within 15 years of their discharge. So it is important for veterans to get started on that process sooner rather than later, because if, for example, they were discharged under other than honorable conditions, there might have been extenuating circumstances that were not recognized at the time, but now an independent review board would look and say, perhaps you should have indeed been under honorable condition discharge. On that note, and in relating it back to disabilities, the Veterans Administration has been a lot better in recent years, probably within the last decade, on recognizing PTSD and sexual trauma as service-connected disabilities or illnesses. So, excuse me, a lot of veterans, and you'll see this also with a lot of female veterans who experienced any type of sexual abuse or trauma in the military, or veterans who were experiencing PTSD, and at the time that was very unexplained. There is a lot more leeway now for veterans to appeal or request a discharge upgrade and say, this is the circumstances. I was not behaving poorly because I was behaving poorly. It was because I was experiencing mental health issues due to these extenuating circumstances. And the VA has issued a lot of direction in recent years about how PTSD, sexual abuse, and sexual trauma should be treated now. And it's a very liberal, if you can show that PTSD, sexual abuse, sexual trauma, and things of those nature really did attribute to your negative discharge, the VA is supposed to apply a liberal interpretation and grant you an upgrade. In more recent years, the VA has been a lot better. The VA and the military itself have been a lot better about doing pre-discharge planning. So making notes in the veteran's record, actually describing what their disabilities might be, what the records might say, the health records, and then informing the veterans that they have the right to apply for XYZ benefits. Unfortunately, that happened a little too late, so we have a lot of veterans, especially from the 90s, 80s, and even 70s, who by and large were unaware of what benefits they might be entitled to until they happen to come to your organization or our organization, or come into contact with someone who can really give them more information. So all that being said, the summary of disability compensation: it's required that it's a service-connected disability, that you are discharged under honorable conditions, and you can start receiving those benefits providing the disabilities add up to 10% or more. So pension benefits. Take another sip of water. VA pension benefits. First and foremost, this is not to be confused with a military pension. So many individuals, veterans, or organizations assisting veterans, when we hear the word pension, we think of their military pension. VA pension is insanely different. So the VA pension specifically, as you'll see in the slide, has different requirements that you have to meet, because the VA pension is meant for what's often referred to as the neediest of the veterans, those who are the most low income, those who have the fewest resources, and those who have extenuating circumstances such as age or disabilities that mean they need more assistance. For example, a veteran, in order to be eligible, would be 65 years or older, or totally disabled, or a patient in a nursing home, or receiving SSDI, or receiving SSI. So they have, a demonstrated need to have some additional funds, to be issued on a month-to-month basis. Now, these benefits do have income and resource restrictions, which we will get into in the next slide. It's important to constantly take a look at the charts, at the VA charts that they issue every year, to determine whether a veteran may meet the income and resource restrictions so that they might be able to receive this type of benefit. In addition to the age and disability factor, and in addition to the income and resource factor, the veteran also had to have served at least 90 days of active service, with at least 1 day falling into a wartime period. So I put in wartime in quotes because they are actually, Congress has done an analysis of what we've considered wartime, and they have issued very specific, down to the day, dates that they consider to be wartime periods. Those dates are available online, they're available at the VA, but just as a general background, the wartime periods are considered to be the Mexican Border War, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and currently the Gulf War. An odd fact about the Gulf War: there has been no congressional end date to that wartime period. Make of that as you will. Typically, that means pretty much any veteran who served, since the early 90s has had their 1 day in a wartime period. So now let's get into, before we get into the income and resources, there's the VA pension itself, which will provide a lump sum benefit per month to the veteran. But then there are 2 additional VA pension programs that can give more money to the veteran depending on their disability status. So the next slide deals with VA aid and attendance. So again, this is an extra benefit added to a veteran's VA pension. So the VA aid and attendance is a veteran is eligible for if they meet additional needs criteria, which includes that they need the aid of another person to perform personal functions required for everyday living, such as bathing, feeding, attending to different needs, wants during the day, or if the person is bedridden, which means they are unable to actually leave the bed and they require someone to come in and assist, or if the veteran is a patient in a nursing home. There's also, if eyesight is limited to a corrected vision of 5 over 200. So basically, if the veteran already meets all the VA pension criteria, but also meets one of these, they can get an additional chunk of money each month. And we'll get into what that chunk of money is in a moment. The second type of additional benefit they can receive is called VA housebound. So this is slightly less restrictive, but still the veteran is mostly bound to their home. They are, possibly able to get around and move throughout the home, but might need assistance still within the home, and getting out and about, possibly for doctor's visits and other things. And so again, you meet the VA pension criteria and you meet one of these criteria for aid and attendance or housebound, you can get an extra chunk, or the veteran can get an extra chunk per month. So the meat of that, the actual numbers, because this is what most veterans actually need to be looking at. For the VA pension, without taking into account aid and attendance or housebound, for a single veteran, which means he or she does not have a dependent referring to a spouse or a child or someone else they claim as a dependent, a single veteran may only receive up to $1,146 a month in VA benefits. Similarly, these numbers are also the maximum of income they are allowed. And what that means is if the veteran is receiving, let's say, Social Security retirement of $1,000, then the VA pension will only give the veteran that additional $146. And there are some exceptions with that, which I'll mention in a moment, but essentially the income can only go up to that amount, which means the VA will only pay whatever the difference is. So there's a bit of juggling that needs to be done when veterans are thinking about applying, because they need to figure out whether this is actually going to be a net benefit for them, and need to determine which benefits may actually be the right ones to apply for. So these benefits do change. They go up, or the income limits and the max allowable payment go up depending on the number of dependents that the veteran has. And I'm not going to get into too much, but for example, a veteran plus one dependent, meaning a spouse or child, can then have up to $1,500 in income, or up to that $1,500 in the max payout. So, and again, the VA has a chart with all of the information needed to figure out exactly what the veteran may be able to receive. So the pension amount plus one of these extra benefits that we talked about. For the pension and the VA aid and attendance, a single veteran with no dependents can receive up to $1,900 or $1,911. And then a VA housebound single veteran could receive up to $1,400. Those additional benefits also pay out or also cover certain health benefits that we will get into a little bit later. But for right now, this is just the hard numbers that we deal with. It's also important to note that veterans can deduct certain medical expenses from their existing income to qualify. And it's considered to be any medical expenses exceeding 5% of the maximum amount pension rate. So again, there's a little bit of math that can be done with the veteran at that time to determine whether applying is going to benefit them, and if so, what the veteran needs to be prepared for in order to qualify. So some issues regarding these benefits. Veterans cannot receive both VA disability compensation and VA pension. They cannot go hand in hand. If the veteran believes that he or she is eligible for both, then he or she should apply for both. And then the VA will grant or approve whichever they believe is the better amount or the more appropriate one. There is an offset issue that is what I kind of just talked about, where if you are receiving the pension and then other benefits, the VA might offset what they give you so that they don't go over the maximum allowed income. That's what we refer to as offset, which means it is imperative that the veteran or whoever is assisting the veteran with submitting an application be completely forthright with all resources and with all incomes. You are required to report that accurately. Because if you don't, which I'll get to in a second, it could be bad news for the veteran. But the other, under the offset issues, I listed a few of the benefits that you can receive with others and a few that you shouldn't receive with others. Essentially, disability compensation is not needs-based. You're going to get that regardless. VA pension is a needs-based program with income limits, which means it will have to get offset in some way. And for those who might be familiar with Social Security, retirement, SSDI, or SSI, you understand the needs base and how the offsets typically will work. So what happens when the veteran receives more than what he or she is eligible for? Well, that's an overpayment. So if the VA sends benefits to the veteran that the veteran should not be receiving, so the veteran either didn't report their income correctly for whatever reason, or perhaps the veteran, applied for benefits and then they went back to work, or they had some sort of benefit they started receiving, maybe a late pension, and didn't report it to the VA. It could result in an overpayment. And an overpayment refers to any cash benefits that the VA paid to the veteran that they should not have received. And what the VA will do is they will tally up the months that you should not have been receiving that benefit, and they will send you a bill. They will say, hey, you are probably terminated from this type of benefit, and also you have an overpayment now, which means you need to pay back X number of dollars. It can typically go into the thousands and thousands depending. Please send us a check within 30 days. It's not great. But there are some options that the veteran has at that time. So the veteran can appeal the overpayment decision, stating that the overpayment is wrong for some reason, or that it wasn't intentional, that perhaps it was the fault of the VA itself. The veteran can decide to negotiate the debt and actually do what's called a compromise with the VA, where they say, okay, yes, there's an overpayment. It's not what I think the VA says it is. Let's compromise, or pretty much let's settle on maybe a lower amount and then pay it off in one lump sum or go into a repayment plan. Even if you don't compromise, then you can still do the repayment plan with the VA to try and pay it back. If the veteran does none of the above, they don't appeal, they don't negotiate, and they don't enter into a repayment plan, then the VA will send that overpayment debt to the U.S. Treasury. And the U.S. Treasury is not going to be nice about what it does next. It will garnish other Social Security wages or other government benefits. It can take money out of tax returns. It can go after a lot more than a standard, debt collector might be able to, because it is the federal government, and this is a federal debt. They can choose to pursue it in those ways. They can choose to hand it over to a collection agency, at which point more fees get attached. And if the U.S. Treasury decides that this might have been fraud, actual fraud, you knowingly deceived the VA, they might go after you even more. Turn it over to the Office of Inspector General and assess even more fees and fines. for that. So it's never good to get to that point, though. You know, if there is an overpayment, the veteran definitely needs to seek assistance almost immediately, because there are timelines that they need to file in order to appeal, negotiate, or enter into a repayment plan. The next slide deals with VA disability indemnity compensation. So this is a benefit for a spouse where the veteran has passed away. There are only two types of spousal cash benefits for surviving spouses. And the first one is this disability indemnity compensation. This is essentially for the surviving spouse of a veteran where the veteran passed away during active service, or the veteran passed away as a result of their service-connected disability, or passed away as a result of a disability that should have been service-connected. And there are some requirements regarding how long the veteran and the surviving spouse needed to be married, and that changes depending on when they were married, and etc. So definitely pay attention to that. There is another portion that the surviving spouse has to not be remarried. So this on the next slide shows that when the spouse applies for these benefits, he or she is going to need to show evidence. It's very similar to what we talked about as that chain with disability compensation. They need to show that the veteran was receiving benefits or was entitled to receive benefits relating to a service-connected disability, and that the veteran passed away because of that disability. And then, of course, they're going to need to prove through marriage records or divorce records or what have you, the marriage status at the time the veteran passed away. So I do want to highlight here that it can be very difficult for a surviving spouse to apply for disability indemnity compensation when the veteran was not already receiving benefits, because basically then it's the surviving spouse having to go through the medical records and trying to get statements to show, no, the veteran really should have been receiving these benefits. It's an extra hurdle. And so it also goes to why it's important for the veteran to try and jump on these benefits as soon as possible, because it can make it easier for a surviving spouse later on. Similar to disability compensation, there is no income or asset restrictions for disability indemnity compensation. It is a straight monthly lump sum that the surviving spouse can receive. The next type is VA survivor's pension. It is essentially when the veteran met all of the criteria for the VA pension, and then the surviving spouse now meets the income and resource restrictions. And this is where it gets very tricky. So on the next slide, we have what the actual income and what the actual income limits are. So for their surviving spouse, the income limit severely drops. If you notice, there is a pretty substantial difference between what the single surviving spouse can receive in comparison to what the veteran himself or herself could have received while alive. I don't have a good explanation for why that is. It just is what it is. And so you can see currently a single surviving spouse would only receive up to $756 a month in VA pension, survivor's pension benefits. And then, of course, similar to the regular VA pension, that will get bumped up depending on the number of dependents and depending on whether the surviving spouse may qualify for VA aid and attendance or housebound. Again, the veteran or the surviving spouse can deduct certain medical expenses to make herself or himself eligible. So it's important to keep in mind those different figures as the surviving spouse is encouraged to apply. So those are the VA cash benefits, and that was the most surface level analysis that I can give you of those. I want to emphasize that for any organization or veteran who wants to dig deeper into these types of cash benefits, please consult with a VA accredited attorney. I, for example, am always happy to consult on these issues, but it's very important that the information, that you don't just keep it at a surface level, that you go a little bit deeper when the veteran is actually asking what benefits they might be entitled to. So those are the cash benefits, but now I want to move into the non-cash benefits because these can, in many cases, be just as useful. So for the non-cash benefits, they have similar requirements as the cash benefits when it comes to the veteran being discharged under honorable conditions. So bad conduct, dishonorable discharge, mostly that is going to eliminate any types of benefits that the veteran's going to receive. There are a few benefits, such as the GI Bill, that have higher requirements where there needs to be an honorable discharge. So it's important for each of these benefits just to double check which requirements factor in here. So I'm not going to go too deep into each of these, but at least for the training, or excuse me, the education and the training, most people are familiar with the GI Bill or the Montgomery Bill that sends active duty members to college. But the VA also offers what's called training and upskilling. So essentially, those are opportunities for the veteran who has left service to keep their training with, for whatever they were doing in service, to keep those skills going to help them transition into civilian life, or to provide even additional training so that they can take what they knew, get a little bit more educated or knowledgeable or technical training, and then transition into a different job. So it's important that people, organizations of veterans, don't just think only education. There are other trainings that are possible. There are economic opportunities as well. The VA has assistance with finding jobs. There is, for anyone who has ever applied for a federal job, there is the federal preference that veterans can select. It gives veterans a slight leg up, in comparison to another equally qualified candidate who is not a veteran. And then, of course, there are some small business assistance and other types of employment benefits that are handy for veterans, who are trying to get back out into the workforce. So these can be veterans of any age, really. So additionally, the VA provides for estate planning. And that estate planning is not only can they assist with the actual planning of a veteran's estate, they can also assist with VA life insurance, with actual benefit, or with the actual burial benefits, and then benefits that will go to a surviving spouse or possibly surviving children as well. So the next slide deals with housing benefits, and then I want to focus on the homeless resources as well. So for the housing benefits, this is what a lot of us know as, say, the VA home loans to assist veterans with getting into home ownership at low interest rates, with next to no down payments, without having to pay private mortgage insurance. And then there are also different types of benefits for disabled veterans, such as being able to go into a veteran's home and adapt certain things to help them move about more easily depending on their disability. Let me make sure. Okay, the other part that I didn't, which I'm surprised I didn't list in here. Oh, just kidding, it's under homeless resources. Okay, for homeless resources in particular, there is a crisis line and a homeless hotline that the VA has set up. So any veteran who is homeless or at risk of homelessness is able to call and get connected with an individual counselor, basically, who will help the veteran either stay out of homelessness or get out of homelessness. And some of the things that they can do is provide emergency health care. Perhaps the health is what has caused a veteran to lose their home. They can provide emergency health care. They can provide private housing, landlord-tenant situations where the VA is subsidizing the rent or paying for it entirely. And these are what's referred to as the HUD-VASH and the SSVF programs. So the VA, obviously as a response to the increasing number of homeless veterans, has tried to up the amount of benefits that homeless veterans can receive, and also try to make the entry to receiving those benefits better. which is why they created this hotline. And of course, we have medical benefits. I could do an entire presentation on VA medical benefits. That is not what this is right now. Just be aware that there are eligibility requirements for veterans to receive medical benefits. Now it's a lot easier for a veteran to be discharged from service and immediately go into the VA Health Administration and start receiving their benefits. For older veterans, you may still have to apply, and it might be a slightly uphill battle, but mostly almost every veteran is eligible unless there is a bad conduct or dishonorable discharge. That being said, the VA Health Administration actually has authority to make its own decisions about who they treat. So, a veteran may not be eligible for certain cash benefits because of their discharge type, but the VA Health Administration can make their own decisions and say, sure, you're not eligible for the cash benefits, but you're still eligible for medical services. And when the Health Administration looks at the veterans who are applying for services, they will look at level of disability, they will look at age, they will look at various factors, and then put the veteran into different categories. And those categories are going to determine, the level of assistance that a veteran gets, the copay that one might receive, prescriptions, etc. And then I do also want to highlight that for the Atlanta area, female veterans have a specific point person and a specific hotline that they can contact. Again, the VA has recognized a lot of shortcomings in previous years and are trying to make up for that. And one of those shortcomings was the assistance provided to female veterans. And so they wanted to specifically create a hotline targeted towards female veterans who may have experienced some sort of sexual abuse, sexual trauma, or something to where their needs are not going to be met by just going through the regular channels. So definitely take advantage of that as well. So all of these benefits, how does a veteran apply for benefits? Well, like any other benefit, it is a long and complicated process. More often than not, the veteran is not going to understand the benefits that he or she might be entitled to. They're not maybe aware of resources that are out there. So it's important that when we do come into contact with veterans, we inform them these are the resources that are out there and this is what to expect when applying. So we've already gone through, it's difficult, there's going to be a lot of evidence required, and there's a sophisticated knowledge that's needed in order to apply. That is why there are different types of organizations to assist veterans for free in applying for these benefits. So the first assistance type of organization, they are called veteran service organizations. Everything I put in these following slides are Atlanta and Georgia specific. However, they do generally apply to any state a veteran may live in. So first, the veteran service organizations, also referred to as VSOs. These have dedicated and accredited claims agents and attorneys there to assist veterans with applying, appealing, or just answering questions about benefits. They are not a part of the VA. They work with the VA, but they are not a part of it. So for example, most people are familiar with AMVETS or American Foreign Legion. No, that's not what I'm trying to think of. American Legion. There we go. Those are different types of veteran service organizations that will have claims agents there to assist with the process and to assist with the process throughout the entire application, not just a one and done. So it's important to send veterans to these people because they have the expertise and the knowledge to actually get the ball rolling, or even if the application's not ready to be submitted, to inform the veteran of what he or she might be entitled to and start the process of them getting the evidence that might be required. You can always go online and search for veteran service organizations. There are a variety of organizations dedicated, some are dedicated to African American veterans, some are dedicated to females or veterans of certain types of wars. Um, there's a specific list, and veterans are welcome to choose which ones that they feel comfortable most going to. And of course, they can go to any number of them and see who might have the capacity to assist at that time. I just realized I have the same slide twice. The next one also says Veteran Service Organization, as does the one after that. So I apologize. One of those was intended to be, so I'll just say the next one, and then the third was an oopsies. So one of these was intended to be the VA itself. So the VA also has claims agents and attorneys to assist veterans with submitting applications and getting documents together. The quality of these individual field offices and these agents varies widely state to state. Some, such as those here in Atlanta, given our veteran population, have long wait times, so they might not be the best people to go to first, but they are available. And typically they are already stationed within the VA, such as the VA hospital. So they more often than not, are the first ones veterans may really talk with. But just it's important to inform the veteran that there are other options. They do not have to go through the VA to get that assistance. So skipping forward to application assistance versus private attorneys, there are also private attorneys who may be willing to assist in the preparation of applications. That is more often than not going to be very rare. Quite frankly, there is no money to be gained, so private attorneys may only do this on a pro bono basis. They are actually restricted from charging for preparing for an application. Private attorneys more often than not come in at the appeals stage, in which case they might be able to get paid through lump sum benefits that the veteran might receive. Here in Atlanta and in Georgia as a whole, there's also the State Bar of Georgia's Military Legal Assistance Program. They assist veterans and active duty service members. They have a network of pro bono attorneys and attorneys on their own staff who can assist with certain types of issues, not just submitting applications. It could just be, a veteran is having trouble with home ownership or a consumer law issue. They can't get assistance elsewhere. The Military Legal Assistance Program might be able to place them with a pro bono attorney. And then we have the Emory Veterans Law Clinic, currently run out of Emory, where it has both volunteers, students, and permanent staff members to assist with a variety of issues for veterans, such as the preparation of applications and the appeal of applications that have been denied. So it's important that veterans just know there are a wide variety of organizations out there to assist. Atlanta Legal Aid, as I mentioned, we can also help in providing advice and referrals to different organizations should the veteran or another nonprofit need just some additional backup. So that is the end of all this presentation. I do want to emphasize again, by federal law, a person must be accredited by the VA in order to give information and advice or assist in the preparation of an application that involves VA cash benefits. Okay, so if the veteran is going to an organization or is going to a specific person, they need to make sure that person is VA accredited. The VA website has a current list of VA accredited attorneys and claims agents that can be searched by anyone. And then nonprofits themselves, organizations that are trying to assist veterans, need to be careful that the information they give is general and very broad in nature and not specific enough as to run afoul of this requirement. So definitely, if you need to collaborate with another organization, make sure there is a VA accredited attorney or claims agent on staff who can give you that information. So next is questions. And I am happy to answer any range of questions as long as I have a good answer. Any so far? All right. I think, Randy, you had sent, 2 questions yesterday to me, and I'm trying to remember what they were. One involved the VA or the Veterans Community and HIV outreach, and then I believe another one may have had to do with mental health. Okay, so with regard to the HIV community, how to engage, especially on the veterans side, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer. I have not run into that issue, and I also just don't have enough of the institutional knowledge to answer that question. I wish I did. And so if somebody out there has the answer, if there are specific organizations assisting veterans living with HIV/AIDS, I would love to know about them. But to go to the second question, which was about mental health services, I touched on this a little throughout the presentation. The VA does offer mental health counseling. There, I believe, are also substance abuse counseling, things along those lines. The VA, unsurprisingly, has taken a while to recognize a lot of mental health issues as true disability or illnesses for veterans. And so their services have become better, but still have a long way to go. But a lot of what they have done is instituted policies and procedures to allow veterans living with mental health illnesses greater access to treatment and then greater access to cash benefits. And for example, going back to PTSD, sexual abuse or trauma, which may have led to different types of mental health issues, the VA is now giving those a lot more credence when it comes to assessing whether that is considered a service-connected disability or illness. So I do encourage veterans and those interacting with veterans to be very frank with each other, and then in the application stage, it is often uncomfortable to talk about mental health issues, but it is important here because those can net you more benefits. Just to give a couple examples without actually obviously getting into client details, I have spoken with veterans who, as a result of sexual abuse and sexual trauma, started smoking marijuana while in service or started acting out recklessly, and were discharged under, other than honorable conditions. They were turned down for benefits, but, in this, I can't remember the specific case, but it was over a decade ago. But because of the newly instituted policies by the VA, this individual was able to request a discharge upgrade, and was able to eventually get cash benefits because the explanation and the medical record showed that the trauma that she experienced was a direct link to the outrage, or not the outrage, excuse me, the outbursts and her conduct, which were mitigating circumstances that the VA agreed. So it's important that when we discuss these issues with veterans, we are very frank with them, and that we have such a rapport so that they are able to tell us about these issues, because in the long run, more access to more of these benefits and resources really does help. All right, well, we're going to end it there. Again, my name is Jeremy Striegel. I am a staff attorney with Atlanta Legal Aid. It's been my pleasure to assist on this. If you have any other questions, reach out to the Pro Bono Partnership of Atlanta, and I am here also as a resource. So thank you, everyone.